Hello, I'm Cris Hardaway. Welcome to this edition of The Best Times, a series that looks at life after 50. The phrase end of life is an uncomfortable one. We don't want to talk about dying, certainly not our own death or the death of a loved one. 60% of people say that making sure their family is not burdened by tough end-of-life decisions is extremely important. Yet 56% of us have not communicated our end-of-life wishes, either verbally or in written form. Tonight on The Best Times, we bring together a panel of 4 experts to discuss what we don't discuss. Dr. Clay Jackson is a clinical assistant professor of psychiatry at UT and medical director of Methodist Alliance Hospice and Palliative Care. Dr. Perry Little is Champlain Manager at Methodist Germantown Hospital and pastor of Gateway Church of God in Christ. Dr. Scott Morris is founder and executive director of the Church Health Center. And Taleka Perry is director of Methodist Hospice Residence. We begin our discussion talking about the conversation that people are reluctant to have with their loved ones. I think perhaps the phrase end of life is a bit of an uncomfortable one. I don't think anybody finds dying, a discussion about dying, easy. And so we don't have the conversation. We don't talk about it. We know we should, but we don't. Why don't we have that conversation?
It's a fantasy world we sometimes live in, thinking that life will go on forever without realizing that there's a beginning and there's an end.
All right, why should we have this conversation, and what should we say in this conversation? How do we start it and initiate it?
I think the way you start and initiate it is to say, as Scott has mentioned, I know that at some point things are going to end for me, so I can't choose that. But I do have significant input into what that end will look like. And there are ways to approach this with our family and loved ones to say, these are the things that I value. These are the things that are important to me. And these are the type of treatments or approaches to treatment that I find tolerable and that I find acceptable in terms of my personal dignity and what my expectations are. So shaping what is inevitable is a part of that conversation.
And when should one have this conversation?
When you're healthy. When you're healthy, you shouldn't wait till that time. You know, when you're sick and you have to make those difficult decisions, it's when everybody's healthy and they're talking and they're around, and you just normalize it. When you talk about end of life, it should be a normal part of conversation.
Now, in your experience, do you find that to be the case, though? Don't people procrastinate and wait?
They do. But that makes it difficult for the one that has to make that decision when you wait till that time comes to have to talk about it.
I could almost guarantee you, I mean, Clay deals with this more than I do probably, that if you wait until you're bumped up against the end, you're going to make bad decisions. You know, that people don't make good decisions in a crisis as a general rule. And this is not something you do every day. So you need to have thought it through, and you need to think it through with your family. And what I believe is that if your children live far away, they're going to tell the doctor, do everything you can, without realizing that there's a lot we can do right now to prolong death. It may not be about prolonging the quality of life that people have, but the doctor can do a lot about prolonging death, and none of us want that.
We all sort of envision that we're going to either die suddenly so we won't have to worry about these things,
right,
or perhaps that we'll have time. We'll have time to think about it. But that's really not the case for the majority of us, and I think that our mental capacities may be diminished in such a way, or our communication capacities may be diminished
right,
in a way that we can't communicate with family when we finally see that the end is coming. I'm struck, Cris, by the idea that we talk about financial planning from the time we're 21 years old. We don't wait until retirement to talk about retirement and financial planning. So if money is taboo, but we found a way to talk about that in our culture, I think the way in which we're going to have medical treatment when we're debilitated or we have life-limiting illness, we should move further back in our lives and think about that with families while we're healthy.
Yeah. Do you think our culture has a death phobia?
I would think so. I think we kind of think that death is optional. That, especially with medical technology today, we kind of look at it as an option as opposed to facing the reality that we are going to die someday, and taking responsibility to make plans for that while we're still living, while we're in good health, and can make the rational decisions to prepare for that.
Jewish culture, Hindu culture, Christian culture, Muslim culture, we have a rich and very religious heritage here in the Mid-South, and yet as very religious people, we still don't embrace death as being part of life. We still don't embrace meaning beyond the here and now in a practical way. And do you find it's a challenge for families, even though they are people of belief and practice and worship and faith, that still we act as if this is the only thing and this is what's to be clung to?
Right, and I think one of the things is, when you talk about preparing for death, faith is, for most people, this kind of preparation for death, but at the same time, we don't believe we're going to die, so we won't take the necessary actions to kind of put things in place to say that this is what I want done, this is how I want to be treated when I come to those final stages. So
the problem I find is that we have come, no matter what your religious point of view, what we believe in is Plato. Because Plato said that your body is the prison house of the soul. And from a spiritual point of view, we are looking to care for the soul, care for our spirit, and the body is actually a bad thing. But from a Christian, Jewish, Muslim standpoint, it is just the opposite. The body's a good thing. And we are dust and breath. We are body and spirit. And if you're not caring for your body, you're not actually being faithful. That's the message that we have figured out a way around. We believe more in Plato and Descartes than we do in Jesus, Paul, Moses, and Buddha.
Yeah. I'm curious, since we're talking about the religious, the spiritual aspect, I want to talk about roles. Let's talk about the role that a minister or a chaplain should play in encouraging people to have this conversation and then helping them through it. What's the role that religion and spirituality should play?
I think it should be the role of, especially the religious leaders, to those who are over congregations, to educate the congregation and prepare them for the events that will come in the future, definitely as it relates to dying well. One of the things that you'll always find is that when the congregation has not been properly educated, then to some degree that responsibility is going to fall on the minister, because when they call him to the hospital to be with the family, somebody has to make the decision. And so they're looking for pastor to kind of instruct them in the right direction as to what decisions should be made. So if he's properly educated them, then they can easily make that decision together.
Now, I'm serious, as a chaplain, you've run across situations where you've been in exactly those situations.
Yes, that we see it all the time, where, sometimes the pastor is even holding on by faith when the medical evidence is saying that, it's not going to happen, and that's not to negate faith. We believe in miracles.
It's actually sometimes the pastor who is pushing for keep going.
Right.
I mean, which is sort of odd, right? The pastor ought to be the one to help us figure out that death is not the enemy.
In the church or in the synagogue or the temple, why wait until a minister or clergy is called to the hospital? Why not have it in an elder class, in certainly in a Christian church, a discipleship training program? There would be a great time to have a class on it, and it's so much easier to talk about end of life, palliative care, hospice, when we're talking to 20 or 30 people than if we're looking straight at you saying, okay, Bob, now's the time that we need to talk about your death. I think it's easier for us to embrace information when it's general information for the group.
Yeah.
And Clay, I don't think the conversation ought to be just about people over 50. It's a family deal.
Okay.
Because if you're 25 and you're in a car accident, we're now dealing with the issue, right? And so this is about how we see ourselves as a family. And the beauty of the 5 wishes is that one of the things you do is create what is often referred to as an ethical will. What are those things I care about in my life that I want to pass on to my children, my grandchildren? It's not just how do I pass on my material possessions, it's how do I pass on the things that matter about life. And so this is not a morbid conversation. This is actually a joyful conversation.
Right.
And Thanksgiving's a perfect time to give thanks for that. And you had said before, make that a time to begin the gift-giving season. But it doesn't have to be just Thanksgiving. You can do it any time that works for you. It could be your birthday.
Any family gathering is a great time to talk about these issues. One of the things that Taleka does at the Methodist Hospice Residence is when a patient comes in, we have a sheet that says, this is what my loved one is like. These are the favorite colors, these are the favorite meals, these are things that are important to them. And so when we're reviewing that patient in our care plan, we talk about who that patient is as a person, not just a person with advanced lung disease or advanced heart disease. This is a person who has a dog that they cherish. So that's one of my favorite times of our clinical meetings and administrative meetings, is learning about the patients. As you said, we're not just talking about death, we're passing down gifts to others. And I have no doubt, Perry, that you stood with some families who are around a loved one, they're seriously ill with life-limiting illness. And so here's two different families. One family has the information that they need to make their decisions. Another family is in complete chaos and shock because they don't know what to do. And they're turning to the pastor, the doctor, the nurse, the cousin from California. They don't know where to turn because they're both facing life-limiting illness in their loved one. They both got that emotional trauma. But the family who doesn't know, they haven't been given the gift of knowledge. They have an intellectual and mental trauma because they don't know the right decisions to make. So a great gift is to let your family know what you want done.
It is, and it's a huge difference, even at our hospice facility, when families are prepared and they've already had those discussions, the difference that it makes, it's much more a peaceful, serene situation than when they're having those conversations at that moment. It's pure and utter chaos. So you can tell the difference when it's prepared and when it's not.
Are doctors prepared for end-of-life discussion?
No, we're woefully unprepared, Chris. And one of the problems is we have the same problem that our patients have, in that we grossly overestimate how much time is left. There are wonderful studies that have been well done that have shocking conclusions. And those conclusions are, the better I know my patient, the worse I am at prognosis or predicting how they're going to do. In fact, there's a study that shows that oncologists, who are the primary oncologists and see the cancer patient, typically overestimate time left by a factor of 9.
And really, to that point, you guys live in the hospice world, but I think most people don't fully understand hospice.
Yeah.
And I don't know what y'all's average length of stay is, but I'm guessing it's very short as opposed to what the capacity is.
That's correct, and it's got a negative stigma attached to it, and I think that's the problem, community awareness and the negative stigma. Hospice, for someone to qualify, is 6 months or less to live a terminal illness, but there are patients, once they get on hospice, that can live months and months. So we ideally
And if you get better, you could leave hospice, right?
Correct.
It doesn't
We do
mean
have
you're
those
condemned to die.
Correct. It's a great hospice benefit for those who qualify, and it's just a huge support system. Hospice is not a place, it's a philosophy of care. And so when people understand that, it's just a support system that's added to that family, and we help them through that journey. We walk along them, with them.
And yet the reality is that most people who go into hospice die.
That's true, but as Scott was mentioning, unfortunately, many people come to this benefit late. There are some who have remarkable medical recoveries, but as you said, Chris, most people do pass from this life, but they miss out on the full benefit they could have because our length of stay, on average, is 11 to 14 days.
I know, which is so
hello,
sad.
We're the hospice, hello, we're here to help you, hello, and we can get getting the body under control in 11 days is not a problem. People don't die writhing in agony. They don't die breathless. They don't die in tremendous pain. That doesn't happen. Because in a short period of time, our clinicians can, fortunately, with the technology we have, we can get people's symptoms under control. What we can't do in a short period of time is meet your family and have the significant psychosocial and spiritual impact that we'd love to have to help your family be comfortable with this transition. We need more time to do that. So by families not having conversations until late, by faith congregations and worship congregations not having conversations till late, by doctors and patients not having conversations till late, we cheat ourselves as a culture out of wonderful opportunities that we have to support one another as a community of human beings.
And that cheating ourselves out of our culture is really an important thing, because I think, we think that the way it is today is the way it's always been.
No.
This is a very new phenomena.
Absolutely.
That people are not used to being engaged in the end of life and death. And that's not a good thing. I mean, our children, they can go until they're 50 years old and never having seen anybody die. That's not a positive.
Well, we've institutionalized the treatment of death, and we have sort of, if you will, sanitized it away from our lives. I think you alluded to how people used to live until about 100 years ago. Most families actually, at the time of death, gathered in the home, took care of the deceased loved one's body, took care of the burial as a communal event, and various family members were involved. Now, there are reasons why that we have outsourced, if you will, some of those tasks. We actually put people in, we call them funeral homes. We cast rosy light over the body. We walk up and institutionally we say things that have been enshrined in our culture, such as, she looks like she's sleeping. And I don't mean to be unkind, but we sort of isolate ourselves from the death experience as a reality, and it becomes an hour visitation.
My own personal experience, I was 19 years old, and my mother was in the hospital dying from ovarian cancer. She was only 42 years old. You know, as we all know here, there comes a time oftentimes when people's breathing changes and you know that death is near. I was only 19. When that happened with my mother, they sent me to the movies. And so I finally get a page an hour later, you know, from my father, you know, your mother has died. And I mean, that happened over 30 years ago in my life, and today I still remember it and regret the fact that I wasn't at her bedside.
I kind of see that in connection because as Dr. Morris was speaking, I thought about it. My mother passed of the same thing his mother passed of. And my mother passed on the day before Thanksgiving, 2011. But we had already discussed the 5 wishes and talked about that. So we did all of those things. You know, we had the music in the room. We sat down, talked with her, and just kind of going through that experience of being able to be there and allowing her, you know, to die a pleasant death. I guess it meant all of the world to me, my sisters, brothers, that we were a part of that. She was there in her own house, and we were there with her. Yeah.
And Terry, I love that that phrase you used, a pleasant death. I mean, what I am sure of is that people cannot actually die with dignity. Death takes away your dignity. What you can do, though, is die well.
Yeah.
And that sounds exactly what happened with your mother. She did die well, and you helped make it happen.
What is the difference between hospice and palliative care?
Both palliative care and hospice constitute interdisciplinary teams of caregivers. So doctors will be involved, nurses, perhaps pharmacists, social workers, chaplains, volunteers. It's a way of wrapping a care team around that patient that's not just about, we need more penicillin over here, or we need to adjust the ventilator over there. It's about, how do we attend to the needs of this patient as an individual? And how do we start from their story and their approach to meaning in life, and then design a care plan around those circumstances, those values, and those wishes, not how do we fit them into this medical protocol to gain 3 extra days of mortality that's actually not living.
So hospice is palliative care, but palliative care is not necessarily hospice.
Correct. Palliative care, you can still seek curative treatments, and that's the biggest difference. With hospice, you're foregoing the aggressive type treatments, the chemos, the radiations. That's when you just want to focus on quality of life and not necessarily quantity.
I think there's a good distinction here that Taleka makes, and in the cancer world, we talk about cancer-directed treatment versus patient-directed treatment. And so if there is a hope for cure of that cancer, then a patient would seek cancer-directed therapy, radiation, surgery, chemotherapy. In the hospice world, we would say, okay, we're not going to focus on treating the cancer, we're going to treat you. And so we might give pain medication, we might give medication for breathing, nausea, different problems that the cancer might cause in the body, but we don't try to eradicate the cancer. So what doesn't belong in hospice? Now, we do blood transfusions in hospice, we may even do radiotherapy. We may do all types of different treatments that are directed to make the patient feel more comfortable. But what's not a part of hospice is trying to fix the core illness and cure the core illness. If it happens, it's wonderful, but it's not expected in a hospice setting.
All right, we've talked about all the decision making, but eventually you've got to put it down on paper. So let's talk a little bit about the advanced directives. And I know that you like the 5 wishes. Tell me about the 5 wishes. What is that document? What kind of questions does it ask? How do you go about filling it out?
Well, basically, what the 5 wishes does is allows the individual to select somebody who will be the the primary caregiver, if they're unable to take care of themselves, make the decisions for them, say how they want to be treated. It also allows you to put in writing what it is that I want done prior to getting to a point where I can't speak for myself.
Okay. And
also allows you to say, these are the things that I want done. Here's how comfortable I want to be. I want to make sure that if I'm running a fever, cool towels put on my head, or I'm bathed every day, those kind of things that you can't do for yourself anymore, but you have it as one of your wishes that you want this to be done. And even to the extent of saying what I want my family members to know, that I love them, that I care about them, that I forgive them of everything that they've done that may have been wrong, and those kind of things that you put in writing, and how powerful that is for your loved ones to hear it, seeing you or after you have gone on, to know that these are the things that you wrote and these are the things that you requested prior to getting to that state of dying.
There's another document called a physician's order for scope of treatment, or a post form, and that is a Tennessee endorsed form that lets your care team know exactly what you want. So make sure that you've done some sort of advance directive. The 5 wishes is an excellent example. It doesn't require a lawyer. It doesn't require a notary. You don't have to get a legal expense. You don't have to go to LegalZoom or some other website to do this. Right. It's easily done.
Yeah, this is why we at the Church Health Center love this, because it costs $2 and that's it.
$2.
You don't have to pay a lawyer, and it is a legal document in the state of Tennessee.
It's recognized by the state of Tennessee as being authoritative regarding your wishes. Mm-hmm. But that's a legal sense. Cris, I can't emphasize this enough. You have to communicate with the care team. Hey, this is what we want.
Does the care team ask that question?
We're supposed to. But in a crisis, remember, good decisions often are not made in crisis. In a crisis, sometimes the default setting is to do everything first and then ask.
Right, exactly. That happens all the time. I mean, I can think of somebody who was 92 years old. He was in the middle of the night. He had developed pneumonia. He had really never had any sickness in his entire life. Pneumonia is often referred to as an old man's best friend. I mean, he had arrested, he had died, and that wasn't good enough. We had to do everything. We revived him, and he ended up spending the last 2 weeks of his life in the intensive care unit with the tube stuck down his throat. I mean, if we had just let it happen, it would have been a much better way for him to die. He was 92.
In closing, what's the takeaway for viewers on end-of-life issues? What's the best advice?
It's never too early to start making plans.
Yeah.
Don't be passive and expect someone else to just give you the care that you desire. Realize that you need to be an engaged partner in your own living. And that includes the way that your living will end. We can't predict that. So as Taleka says, let's get started, because we do everything else. We spend hours researching what color paint we want on our cars. Why not choose what legacy my family's going to have by talking to them about what I wish near the end of my life?
And I would say that we have to face the existential reality that we're going to die. And facing that reality, then we have to prepare for it, take responsibility to prepare for death just as we prepare to live. We take out life insurance, so in like manner, we should do our advanced care planning ahead of time.
Heidegger said that it is that end point of acknowledging death that actually gives life its meaning. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if you agree with Heidegger as an existential philosopher or not. What I do know is when I see families and patients engaging real issues, it doesn't splinter them. It actually draws them closer together and makes a meaningful conversation, a meaningful experience out of something that can be very confusing and traumatic if it's left undiscussed. Right. Give your families the gift of being real with them about what you value in life and how you want it to end.
For more help starting this conversation with your loved ones, go online to the Conversation Project. To obtain a copy of 5 Wishes, go to agingwithdignity.org. And to download state-approved advance directive forms, go to caringinfo.org. Funding for The Best Times is provided by